Hello, welcome. Thanks for coming to a talk towards the end of the day today. You are in recognizing and avoiding cloud security survival mode. I'm Andrew Krug, and I lead the security advocacy team at Datadog, and I'm joined today by my colleague.
Hi, my name is Rishi. I'm a product manager here at Datadog on the cloud security management product.
And we both couldn't be more excited to be here with you in beautiful Anaheim for the third AWS Reinforce in a row. Whether it's theme parks, baseball, or nature, Anaheim truly has something to offer any interest. Do you know that, in fact, Anaheim, in addition to being California's city of kindness, was named after some of its first settlers who put together two German words for river and home?
And just like all of you attending our talk today, those settlers had to move beyond just surviving in order to create this beautiful city that we're in here. If they hadn't, there would be no theme parks, no convention centers, and no Carl's Jr.
Fun fact, Carl's Jr. was in fact founded in Anaheim. Did anybody know that?
That's such a fun fact. Oh, we had a person that knew that. I got that.
You must be from around here.
So in nature, survival mode happens when stress causes the body to focus only on combating danger, instead of finding ways to avoid or mitigate danger. Some of you may know this as generalized anxiety. I know I do. In fact, staying in constant survival mode leads to unhealthy coping mechanisms and eventually can lead to death in many species, including humans.
So I don't know if anybody in the room would say that that sounds a lot like their day job. But if some of those things do sound a little bit too much like your day job as a software engineer, a cloud defender, or an executive managing a complex application in the cloud, it could be that you are living in cloud security survival mode. So in this talk, we're going to break down just a tiny bit of history of cloud security breaches and ultimately show you some ideas on how you can be more proactive and move your organization out of survival mode and hopefully start thriving in the cloud. And if you don't believe that we're an industry in survival mode, effectively looking to constantly combat rather than mitigate danger, one only need to look at the size of the global cybersecurity market in 2023, which is $202.72 billion. That's the total market, not just cloud. But I think that the thing that's really interesting about this is that according to Grandview Research, that's gone up 12.3% year over year, including the last 3 years. So constant demand for more cybersecurity.
And it's no surprise that spend also goes up with the increasing cost of data breaches. According to IBM's cost of data breach report, wow, how many times am I going to say data breach on this slide? The average cost of a data breach was over $4 million, and that's just the average. So, and we know in today's macroeconomic climate, there's increasing rigor placed on every dollar of operational spend. And on top of that, all these compliance requirements are adding new components and new requirements and new tools that you must have in certain regulated industries. For example, PCI DSS 5.0 now requires a WAF in some cases.
So as mentioned, the concerns are increasing, our applications are getting more and more complex, and the infrastructure is also more complex just by virtue of the way that we're building today. This results in blind spots that attackers can use to pivot into your accounts and persist for long periods of time in infrastructure. And even if you have the right security solution, a totally skilled operations team, and a mature security stack, it can be easy to miss those critical signals in the barrage of alerts that we're all inundated with on a daily basis. In fact, in many cases, attackers are resident in environments now for 100 days. They call that dwell time, and it's actually gone up year over year as infrastructure has become more complex. So clearly, we all need some new solutions that take innovative approaches to solving these problems with the limited resources we all have today. That being said, let's talk a little bit how we can move beyond just survival in the cloud and what new strategies might be effective at helping you increase your security maturity inside of those complex environments.
Cool. So how many of you are familiar with Datadog as a product? I know some of you were at the booth earlier today, so thank you for coming out. So we're traditionally an observability product, and I've been around for over 10, 12 years at this point. And on top of that, we've built security offerings. It's no surprise that our security offerings are a little different than others. The way we think about building great products, we start with the 3 pillars of observability, which is application performance, infrastructure monitoring, and log management. We use this data not only to create effective threat detections, but also enrich detections and provide additional context to give you the full picture all in one place. In some cases, we're able to prevent attacker behavior completely, which we'll also get to later in the talk. One of the benefits of adopting this 3-pillar strategy and building on top of observability is that we can put together basic inventories. For example, what you see here, this is called our service catalog. So what we've done is list out all the services in your environment. And from here, you can see who owns the service, who's responsible for managing it, operational health, performance, and even security incidents or risks. This includes vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and threats all in one place. So if you're a resource owner or a service owner, this is a one-stop shop for all of your needs. We all know that having an inventory is the first step to building out any good security strategy in the cloud. So this is the cornerstone for any strategy. Go to the next slide. For example, on top of log management, we've built out a cloud SIEM. This uses not only traditional logs from the observability side of the house, but also things like CloudTrail audit logs or even guard duty, combined with application logs, and puts together a full picture for effective detections. On top of our infrastructure monitoring, we're able to leverage the same agent we're using to detect performance issues to also look at runtime threats or attacker behavior. On top of that, we're also able to detect misconfigurations or vulnerabilities in your production workloads. And finally, application security management is built on top of Datadog's APM. So we're leveraging the tracing libraries there to detect sophisticated attacks right at the edge. All of these minimize noise and help engineers be more effective at determining what's going on, the criticality of these attacks, what to do next, who to contact, and putting together the big story. All these tools leverage not only metrics, traces, and logs, but also the detection engine, which is built out by Datadog's security research program and our detection engineering team. These folks stay up to date on what's going on with the security landscape, write effective detections, tune detections globally for all of our customers, and make sure that the out-of-the-box content we provide to you is high quality. Next slide. And
so if you're wondering, by the way, what the attack landscape looks like, you can check out our cloud incident recap. And I don't know if anybody's seen this, but it's a great write-up that we published towards the end of last year that details the trends in cloud breaches and the root causes for all of those security incidents. The roundup leveraged public sources of data, as well as the opinions of prominent security researchers like Houston Hopkins, Rami McCarthy, and Datadog's own Christophe Tafani de Reaper. And if you want to check that out, you can get to it at the link on screen that's published on Datadog Security Labs. The TLDR, in case you don't go read it, is that there's still a commonality in the trends that we're seeing across all these breaches. And it's still very easy to avoid many of those very impactful and expensive root causes. And that's where some of these products come in, because you can detect, remediate, and prevent using the right tooling. And that's something that we spend a ton of time thinking about on behalf of our customers and our user community at Datadog.
all right. Thank you, Andrew. So let's chat quickly about types of detection methods. As we talked about before, we have a large amount of raw data being collected by Datadog, and how do we actually convert this to effective detections? First off, we have threshold detections. This is kind of the bare minimum. You've seen this type of attack before. You know exactly what you're looking for. You know what the query is. And so you write that query, and every time that happens, you're alerted on it. It's great. It's pretty backwards looking and very much survival focused, right? Next, we have new term detections. It's a little bit better. requires you to actually know what the bad activity could be, but perhaps you don't know where that threshold exactly is, right? So it helps you take into consideration normal activity that is related. And finally, we have anomaly detection. This brings us into the realm of learning about unknown unknowns. This is how you detect attacks that you're not aware of and stay ahead of survival mode and stay up to date on whatever's happening out there, right? We actually recently we're getting very close to releasing some new things in this space, specifically around container anomalous behavior based on container images. So look out for that announcement. That'll be super cool. So we talked about detection methods. Let's talk about a detection platform. First off, data sources. This is the number one thing in making sure that you have the most out of your detection platform. This can include details like resource information, threat intelligence, observability context like metrics, traces, and logs, cloud-provided audit logs, and anything else you want to add in there. Things like team tags, service tags, high-priority resources. All of that lives in one place in Datadog. Secondly, out-of-the-box content. Yes, you can skip this, but we'll get into that later. You want to make sure that when you turn on that detection platform, you're seeing value right out of the box. You can always tune that to fit your needs, but you should be starting with something, not just a plethora of data that you have to then sort through. Let's look at how you can be truly resilient with all these three components here. In most cases, you have an event that you're alerted on, right? And then you have a human or some intelligence or something going on to decide if that alert is actually a threat. We can add threat intel here. We can add entity context here. And that brings us a lot closer to detecting real threats, or in some cases, being a lot more confident in saying, this is a high-fidelity detection, this is a threat, let's go from there. So with that, I wanted to share a little bit about the entity context that I was mentioning earlier. So this is our resource catalog within Datadog. And since we have all of this available insight, right, we were able to look at the resources coming from your cloud accounts. We have agents deployed in your hosting containers. All of that lives in one place. In this view, we're showing you where the findings are, or misconfigurations are in your resources. You can also look at threats. What this gives you is the ability to say, all right, I'm looking at this AWS EC2 instance, and this is the relationship graph. These are all the resources that are related, and other resources that may have issues with them. I can go investigate from there. I can look at misconfigurations that are related to this instance. I can look at active threats. And it's all in one place, whether you're looking at it from a security standpoint or a DevOps standpoint, or consolidating all of that here. So how do you actually measure effective detection? There are three main things here. One is coverage. This is breadth and depth. For me, breadth is, am I able to detect suspicious activity like a suspicious request or potential reconnaissance activity, all the way down to my data is actively being exfiltrated, there's an attacker in my system. And obviously, those have different levels of priority and risk, but having the ability to see all of that is very important. Secondly is depth, different layers in the stack. Do you have coverage at the application level, all the way down to your hosting containers? Secondly, relevance. We talked about a lot of different things here. How do I sort through all of this and make sure I know what's important for me, my business, my team even? So we want to filter out to only what's actionable for you, but maintain that other data for context or investigation. And finally, versatility. For this, I want to share a little example. Last year, when Log4Shell was a big thing, I'm sure we are all aware of that, this is a Datadog blog post that we wrote at that time to say, this is how we can help, and as you can see, this is a detection at the application level for an exploit of this vulnerability. However, even before we built out this detection, we were able to detect the post-exploit behavior at the infrastructure level because we're able to detect a Java shell being spawned, right? So that's a versatile detection. You don't need to be reactive and stay up to date on what's going on when you're actually looking at the attacker behavior. Obviously, we need a combination of both, but that's kind of what I mean by versatile detections. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew.
And that brings us to the most exciting part of the presentation. And that's what's new in the confluence of observability and telemetry with regard to security at Datadog. Up until now, we've discussed 3 pretty cool detections and how to leverage them to gain more visibility into your environment. And on this scale, this is how computationally intensive it is to do each of these, right? We all started out kind of running a SIEM, which tends to have a very high cost, not dollar cost, but a high cost with regard to the ability to maintain that, ingest those logs, crunch them down, normalize them. CSPMs have to understand all those resources in order to report on misconfigurations. And then at the endpoint, even though we're using eBPF, that endpoint agent, or cloud workload agent, also has some additional jobs it needs to do. And these are all great. They're part of that holistic security strategy. But just detecting at the cloud provider control plane or the workload really doesn't get you all the way there. So the next phase is really to detect at the edge of the stack or in the application itself. By putting that additional security layer in the application's runtime, we can heavily reduce the burden on those other downstream systems. Threats are the very easiest to stop in the application. And in this screenshot, you're seeing one example of Datadog Application Security Management detecting an SSRF and stopping that attack. And you can see the rich set of information available when it does do that. You get all that additional context that's surfaced by virtue of the fact that we have all of these great things like that inventory, unified tagging, an understanding of the environment just by virtue of the fact that you're using a platform like this. What's new today is the ability to actually take actions, block that threat at the edge, and feed your custom block list back to Datadog and push that out to the rest of the infrastructure running that and the rest of your enterprise if you choose to. As you can see, you can block it permanently, or you can kind of penalty box for a certain amount of time. It's incredibly easy to enable. If you're already using the agent, it's one configuration away to turn on and has a broad set of supported languages. The blocking capabilities, though, don't just stop at the application layer. Since we're securing the full stack, you can also use our other detection tools like Cloud SIEM to feed additional IP addresses back into that global block list, and then it filters out all in the same way. So that prevents attackers from doing additional reconnaissance, pivoting further potentially into your environment, or exploiting additional targets just by virtue of the fact that you detected it in one place and then pushed out that universal global block everywhere. And if you don't want to create your own set of detections, good news, our team of detection engineers have a great set of recommended rules that are already going to be a really effective set to get you started using that blocking feature. So to recap that, in case you didn't catch it all, blocking at the edge is computationally simple. It has a very minimal impact on performance, and it does take the load off of your downstream detection systems and the people who act on them. So it reduces that noise and eliminates things like alert fatigue inside of the teams that are reading and sort of managing, triaging, and acting on those alerts. You don't have to take my word for it, though. Let's see that in action just real quickly here. So what you're seeing on screen is a quick walkthrough of how easy it is to apply one of those policies using the recommended rules by service. So this is not something that you just have to kind of globally turn on. You can roll it out gradually, service by service, using kind of that inventory concept. So now we've come full circle, right? We've taken the inventory, we've applied the blocking policy, and we're preventing things from getting into the environment like SQL injections, SSRFs, and more. The detections are even capable of using additional context from things that were mentioned in that resource catalog. The most notable are things like user IDs. So this results in engineers that are seeing these alerts can easily tune criticality. If they customize them, you can put runbooks and playbooks in the messaging to increase actionability. Or if your operations team is investigating the impact, they can go straight from one of these alerts into the observability data that's always been in the Datadog platform to see the impact on performance or your customers. And with that, if you'd like to learn more about application security management, this is you can visit this link on screen. You can also drop by the Datadog booth where Rishi and I will be right after the session. We're happy to answer questions. Please don't forget to fill out your session surveys and provide your feedback, because that's how we know what you do and don't like in these presentations. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you.